Well, great, everybody. Let's rather than I think we can tell from the participant list who all is here. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a pretty full agenda of updates, and I know that Commissioner Reinhardt, you have to leave at 2, so we'll just move forward. A couple of housekeeping pieces. Feel free to use the chat. If you have questions, raise your hand, or if I miss you, just speak up. Remember to keep your microphones muted if you're not speaking, and also with the exception of Commissioner Victoria, we'd love to see your face if you're speaking in particular. And as it says here on the screen, all this information, presentations, summaries, agendas are on the project website, metrotransit.org/purple line project committees. That's quite a website, but anyway, it's right there on the screen. You can always find it, and there is a summary of the last meeting that was distributed, and if anybody has any changes or questions on that summary, let me know, let us know, either Craig or myself or staff, in the next little while. We will post it to the website after a period of time if there are no objections. So today, I think the two big substantive issues are going to be these White Bear Avenue corridor differentiators. I said that carefully, differentiators, interesting term. And we're going to also kind of get into some of the ridership and capital information, I think, toward the end. With that, I think we are very fortunate to have Lesley Kandaras and Chief Morales from Metro Transit with us. We've spoken a lot about our safety and security issues. You certainly read about it, but I've been just so impressed about how we've leaned in or actually improving conditions. We have a ways to go, but it's really important that, particularly as we get these new transitways in place, that they start well. And I think given the timing of the Purple Line, we will have improved even more so the conditions that we're experiencing, particularly in our light rail, but throughout the system. And it doesn't happen by accident. I think we've had a great police presence, a number of legislative initiatives that are focusing on safety and security. And ironically, as a way of introduction for Lesley to kick us off, who is the general manager, but prior to that was the chief of staff of Metro Transit, and actually helped build, coordinate, and develop the safety and security plan. So she is no stranger to any of this. So with that, unless there's any other questions, and I'm kind of stalling for time to get more people to join us, but it's great to see everybody who is here. Go ahead, Craig.
Mr. Chair, maybe just a note, we do have Councilmember Villavicencio from Maplewood here now, and I'm not sure who the number is ending 38. Maybe.
Oh, hi everyone, it's Lamothe. Yeah, I'm Councilmember in Ward 6.
All right, and I think we've got those who we were expecting. And then just to let the chief and general manager know, I've got the slide presentation control, so feel free to say next slide for me.
Great. Well, welcome everybody, and Lesley, our chief, where wishes to jump in first?
Sure. Chair Zelle, I can kick it off. I'm going to hand it over to the chief in a moment. But first off, just thank you for having us here today. As the chair mentioned, my name is Lesley Kandaras, and I'm the general manager at Metro Transit. Chief Ernest Morales III will start us off today by providing an update on the Metro Transit Police Department. I'll then kind of scope back and talk about our broader safety and security action plan and some of the latest initiatives we've launched over the last several months. And we anticipate we'll have plenty of time for questions and conversation at the end too. So with that, next slide, Craig. So this is our agenda, as I mentioned, and then the chief will start us off with an update from the Metro Transit Police Department.
Next slide. Good morning and well, good afternoon. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak with you and talk about what we're doing and putting in place just to help out. From the first slide, as you see, our approach is not only are we responsible for the 8-county, 85-city metro area, but right now we're at 110 police officers full-time and 14 community service officers. Why is that important? Because we've taken the initiative of placing our community service officers out on our light rail systems to conduct fare enforcement. That has been helping us out in our long-term strategy of reducing crime. And we've implemented that or supplemented that with trip agents that have recently gone out. They're in the field training phase right now with our community service officers. Once that phase is done, I will then take the remaining CSO officers and I will put them out onto the BRTs and the bus routes as well to begin fare enforcement operations there. Next slide, please. This approach, if you look at this is our yearly forecast for last year. So from quarter 1 of 2023 to quarter 4 of 2023, we saw an overall 25% crime reduction. We did have a slight uptick due to the winter months, and this was anticipated and expected for quarter 3 to quarter 4. Now, although we had a 25% crime decrease over the year of 2023, when you compare that to 2022, that we had a increase in crime of 32%. However, I would like to caution you and state that a lot of this was due to proactive activity from our police officers. And what does that mean? We have our police officers visible. We removed them from the cars and we've put them out on our rails where they are addressing our code of conduct and our quality of life issues. So those are raising numbers in as far as citations that are being issued and arrests that are being made. So this is what has led to our crime reduction as well as our presence within the system, because perception is everything. Next slide. Right here, when you look at this is our top 7 crimes. So this is homicide, sex offenses, robberies, assaults, larcenies, theft from person, motor vehicle thefts, burglaries, and breaking and entering. As you can see in the first quarter to quarter 2, we had an increase during the winter months. We then put these strategies that I just discussed into place, and we saw a steady decline quarter to quarter after that. Quarter 2 to quarter 3, -11. Quarter 3 to quarter 4, -10. And quarter 1 to quarter 4, the whole year was a -13 when it came to those categories right there specifically. Next slide. Annual total numbers. So for the total year of exactly what I stated, when you compare 2023 to 2022, we saw an overall increase in crime of 32%. Keep in mind that we were also recovering out of COVID. So now we have an increase in ridership where we're seeing more people come into the system, which is a great thing. We want to continue to promote this. We believe that participation helps our safety. We're safer in numbers. When you look at total crimes that were reported in 2023, that was 7,800. Officer-initiated calls, that contributed to 45% of those jobs that were reported in 2023. So the police officers are being proactive. They're out in the field. They're coming out of their cars, and they're ever more present so that they make positive eye contact with our customers, and they just promote an overall safer environment. I'll turn it over. Next slide.
Right. Thanks, Chief. So building on the Chief's update, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about Metro Transit Safety and Security Action Plan, which really is our broad strategy that pulls on the work from many parts of Metro Transit, our police department, certainly, but also our operations department, our facilities maintenance, our communications team, and so forth. Next slide, please. So the Safety and Security Action Plan, and the chair mentioned this in his introduction, it's the culmination of a couple years of work. Back in 2020, shortly after the murder of George Floyd, Chair Zelle called on the council to do a review of the Metro Transit Police Department. And the first phase of this work really was about deep community engagement, talking to riders, talking to community members, talking to employees about what safety on transit meant to them. From that community engagement, we learned that safety on transit is more than policing alone. It also is the feeling of you experience while waiting for transit. Are you in a well-lighted space? Is it clean? A lot of this contributes to the perception of safety. So from that first phase of engagement, the second piece was the Metropolitan Council forming a police work group that met for 6 months and concluded their work in February of 2022. From their work came a broad vision of public safety on transit based on that community feedback and other research and resources that they pulled together as a work group during their time together. And then that set us off onto this third phase of developing this action plan. And that's the action plan we continue to progress today. It's now comprised of 43 action items across 3 separate areas of work: improving conditions on the system, training and supporting our employees, and engaging customers and partners. Next slide, please. So each quarter, we report to the Metropolitan Council our progress to this plan. All 43 action items in the plan are in some stage of implementation. We don't have any in there that aren't started. So this is an example of some of the information we share with the Metropolitan Council on a quarterly basis, and also make publicly available on our website to show how we're advancing the items in the plan. As you can see, the largest category here are items that are already implemented and ongoing. We also have 15 items where we're in the process of getting them implemented, 5 in planning stages, and 4 that are implemented and complete, meaning like it was a discrete project. So we were able to check it off our to-do list. Next slide, please. So when you hear there are 43 items in this action plan, it sounds like a lot of work is going on, and sometimes it's hard to really distill, what are some of the top priorities of that work. And if you read the full plan, woven throughout it is this commitment to increase official presence on our system. Tracing back to that broad community engagement back in 2020 and 2021, we learned that having a visible official presence on the system leads people to feel safer, more comfortable while riding the system. So a lot of our effort through the action plan has been to build these layers of presence. Certainly the foundational layer remains our Metro Transit Police Department. And you heard the chief speak about the work his officers are doing, his community service officers are doing. A part of our police department continues to be the homeless action team that is specially trained and equipped to work with people who are experiencing homelessness on our system. So that continues to be a critical, essential layer to our safety and security work. What's newer over the last year is we've built up additional non-sworn forms of presence. So we have supplemental security officers at 7 locations right now. Those locations are based off of where we have high ridership, but also have patterns of high police calls for service, customer complaints, employee complaints. So having those non-armed, non-sworn security officers at locations has helped kind of deter some of the problematic behavior that lead people to report feeling unsafe on our system. Another layer is the Transit Service Intervention Project. as part of last year's transportation omnibus passed by the legislature, signed by the governor, we launched this transit service intervention project to increase both code of conduct and law enforcement on the system, as well as social service outreach and connections. So right now, through that effort, we have 10 community-based organizations under contract with us that are providing presence on the light rail system specifically. In the legislation, it was targeted at light rail. So that's become another layer of resources available, again, to really connect people to resources where that's needed. And then the latest layer that we've launched is the Transit Rider Investment Program. This again was part of the legislation, the transportation omnibus that passed last year. There are two pieces to this. One piece, it changes how fare noncompliance is handled. Prior to the legislative change, it was a crime to ride transit without paying. This makes fare noncompliance an administrative offense rather than a criminal one. What that allows us to do is have non-sworn personnel do routine and fare inspection. In the past, when it was a misdemeanor, only our sworn police officers were doing fare inspection. So this has now allowed them to focus on more serious public safety issues and allowed us to have non-sworn personnel doing that routine fare inspection. So that was one piece of this. And then the latest piece that we just launched in February was having TRIP, Transit Rider Investment Program, agents who not only are doing this routine fare inspection, but also have training in customer service, wayfinding, have information again on how to connect people to resources and so forth. So together, we're really focused on creating different types of presence on our system. Again, hearing from our riders and our own employees that visible official presence is a key part of making them feel more comfortable riding. Next slide, please. So I already mentioned the Transit Service Intervention Project, but again, this is a picture of some of our Transit Service Intervention Project outreach staff out there on the system. Like I said, we have 10 contracts underway right now, and they work also very closely with the homeless action team in the police department, which is a long-standing group we have, traces back to at least 2018. But this Transit Service Intervention Project has really allowed us to build on that work and really try to connect with riders who may be in need of some social services. Next slide, please. And then the Transit Rider Investment Program, I also mentioned this when I was describing the different layers. Here's an image of what you'll see our trip agents looking like as they're out and about on the system. And the first cohort began their field training on February 23rd. We're building up to having kind of the first cohort be a group of, or having enough staff through our contract to have 24 people a day on the system across 2 shifts, again, to just provide that additional layer of presence. Next slide, please. And then finally, in addition to focusing on presence, another element that we are putting a lot of attention towards right now is how we communicate expectations for people while they're riding. So in December, the Metropolitan Council adopted a new code of conduct. And that, along with activities that are illegal on this system, comprises these new signs to remind people what their role as a rider is on our system. We're in the process of launching this Take Pride in Your Ride campaign, again, to really help remind people that when you're on public transit, you're sharing public space, and it's important that you're respectful to each other. And so a lot of what you'll see coming out of transit this year is us just trying to find new ways, creative ways to communicate that. One of the first areas we focused on was an anti-smoking campaign. If you've been on light rail or buses in the last few weeks, you might have heard a new recorded announcement from a child reminding people not to smoke. It harms their health when they ride with people who are smoking on board. So that's just one example of how we're trying to think of new ways to get these messages across. Next slide, please. And then I guess this is my last slide. We're also revamping our signage and our online approaches to allowing people to report problems easily. And so both on our website in our app, as well as new signage and key transit locations, trying to just make it easier for people to contact us when they see something that needs attention. So next slide. This should be our final one. Yes. So again, thank you for having us here today. Safety on our transit system is our top priority, and we know there is a lot of interest and a lot of concern in this topic, and we would be happy to answer any questions or talk further about anything that this group wants to learn about. So thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks so much, Lesley. And Chief, honestly, every time I hear you speak, I learn new things, and I know you could keep going. There's a lot that's going on. Every week, there's more activity and more improvements, so congratulations. Are there any questions or comments from anyone here? All right, well, I appreciate you taking the time to fill us in. And I know if anybody has any other concerns, questions, or hear about that, we're pretty transparent about the efforts that are happening, and there's actually would be more opportunities for public meetings just about safety. And
Mr. Chair, we've got a couple of questions for the chief and general manager.
Oh, I can't see that. Go ahead.
I think I saw Commissioner Zhang first and then Councilmember Villavicencio.
Mr. Zhang, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, I think this looks very promising. I would say the messages, and also it's having other people deliver the message through the recording sounds like a great idea. The other one I would also ask is about the reporting of the issues through text messages and using the QR code to report the problems. Have you seen an increase in the volumes, and are you able to respond to it right away, or like is there lag time?
So yes, thank you for the question. We have seen an increase in text for safety as our ridership has increased, which is a great thing. And once we receive those messages, we immediately respond to them. However, due to the fact that the passengers usually get off of the train prior to our arrival, we can't effectively close that out. So what we do ask, and what we do have to put out more effectively, is the fact that if you're texting for safety, if you're utilizing that app, that you provide as much information as possible. So you come across a male Hispanic who's 5'9", wearing all dark blue, be very specific as to what they are wearing, where they are, notice your place, what car you're in. Each car number has, each car, train car, vehicle, has a number. So it will help us to know if it was, for example, car 302A, which means it's on the A side of that vehicle. That will help us to narrow down, because we have a real-time information center. Our analysts at the real-time information center, they receive that information, they immediately track down that individual. But if we don't have detailed information, we're just looking around for suspicious behavior, which isn't helpful. So we need as much detailed information as possible.
And Chair Zelle, if I may just build on what the chief is sharing, which was a great update on text for safety, which is one way to report immediate issues to us. Part of this refresh of signage around reporting a problem is also so people have a way to let us know when there's broken glass at a shelter, when something needs cleaning, something needs attention. That goes into our customer relations department, and we're in the process of strengthening kind of the behind the scenes business processes so we can address those more quickly. But in addition to text for safety, which is what the chief's describing, having these other ways to report just general problems we need to be aware of is part of our overall strategy to just get more on top of those. So.
And just for everyone on the call, that number is 612-900-0411. Once again, that's 612-900-0411.
We do have live cameras at the central control. They can be honing in and watching specific information if they know where to look, right? Great, thank you. Great question. And Nikki, sorry I missed you. I didn't see your hand, but go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to say that I feel that addressing the crime by enforcing fair refusal is not only oppressive, but I think that it does nothing for safety security. None of the partners on the advocacy groups are represented from disability community other than one mental health organization. And, you know, as someone with a person with a disability and who also works for a nonprofit that serves people with disability and does training, I feel that that's egregious. And the fact that if you're talking about homeless community, I would beg to argue that about 75% or more of the homeless community also has people with disabilities, which is another example of how the Met Council and Metro Transit treats people with disabilities as second-class citizens. None of the targeted stations seem to be on the St. Paul side, and if they're going to be, I'd love to see when and where that's going to happen. And, you know, continuously, I ride the system. I feel oppressed. I feel abused. I have to worry every single time my family goes on the transit system, whether they're going to get beat up or robbed. And as far as your voices of children, I don't think that makes any sort of sense at all. I've literally witnessed it. And why would I take directions from a child? It makes no sense. It makes me want to smoke more, and I don't even smoke. So, you know, I don't understand anywhere that the Met Council is heading. And the thing about it is I'm probably one of the biggest advocates for transit. And I'm one of the biggest advocates for the Purple Line specifically. And if this crime issue affects the project of the Purple Line, I'm going to be furious. And Chair Zelle, I emailed you in December and asked to speak with you personally about these issues and never got any response from you. And I am extremely upset about this. I have lots of thoughts and ideas, as you can see, on this issue. And I don't think that they're being addressed properly. And another thing is, we passed legislation that allowed for people with disabilities to ride the transit system free until July, right? So when I started doing that, and I told the bus drivers, hey, I ride the bus for free because I'm ADA certified. They said, yeah, right. But then the next person that came on the bus, they said, oh, I'd like a courtesy ride. They didn't even question them once. Now, I will say that has gotten better, but it's still a division. And it shows that people with disabilities on our Metro Transit lines, whether that's paratransit, mainline transit, light rail, they're being treated like second-class citizens. I go to work on University. I take the light rail every week. I take Metro Mobility every week, daily. And I'm constantly being treated like a second-class citizen by the people who run it and by regular citizens. Do you know regular citizens honk and swear at Metro Mobility buses? Do you know when I had the Purple Line public engagement at the Maplewood City Council, people harassed me about that and slammed their hands on the bus as I got picked up from those engagement processes? So, you know, we need to do something, and it needs to include people with disabilities, because if there's justice somewhere, it needs to be handled.
Well, thank you, Nikki, for your feedback, and I do personally apologize for if I missed your email. We'll make a connection for a visit, absolutely. Regarding the East Metro, I don't know if Lesley, you can point out. I know we're not restricting this only to the West Metro.
Correct. So for the supplemental security, one location identified for supplemental security that doesn't have it yet is the Central Station on the Green Line. But for the Transit Rider Investment Program and for the Transit Service Intervention Project, that is in St. Paul and Minneapolis. It's on both blue and green. So that those layers of presence are in the St. Paul side of the metro too. But you're correct, for supplemental security, none of the sites that currently have security officers stationed there are in St. Paul at this time.
However, I would like to add that identifying your issues. What I did was I took a command captain from West Command and I reassigned him to East Command so that he has immediate oversight over everything in St. Paul so that we can put the necessary resources as far as police officers are concerned in the area so that we can address those needs.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions for the chief or Lesley Kandaras? Go ahead, Commissioner.
Chair Zelle, I just want to acknowledge Councilmember Valencio's experience and just also uplift and ask about, you know, in the implementation, are there considerations for accessibility in the rollout and implementation of a lot of those plans? Because it, you know, I believe Councilmember is very active in this too, in that it's frustrating to hear that, you know, the experience that she's experiencing is like still ongoing.
Well, thank you for lifting that up, and I will just comment, not to go through it at length. I totally respect Councilmember, and she knows this, expertise, life experience, and perspective. And we have a robust program for accessibility. It clearly has fallen short in this case, so we need to follow up and really kind of understand better how we can do better. Absolutely. Any other questions or thoughts? All right, then. Thank you so much, Chief and Lesley, and I really appreciate the efforts you've made and the improvements you've seen. And our work is not done. No question there. We'll need to keep moving forward. With that, we have our next agenda item and a pretty important work that Stephen Smith, our Deputy Project Manager, is going to take us through. Really understanding of the differentiating criteria for the White Bear Avenue corridor. And I think this is gonna, I understand, not get too wonky, but we're getting technical, and I think it's important for us to be aware of that. And they're really starting this next month, a much more public understanding of some of the issues we're facing. So Stephen, take it away.
Mr. Chair, if I may, before Stephen jumps in, I just want to make sure for the record, we had somebody join us during the safety and security conversation with a phone number ending 32, if you could identify yourself. Well, maybe not. All right,
yeah,
well,
no. No, this is Connie Jam with MnDOT. I'm on, I can see everyone, but I could not hear. So it took me a while to connect because I'm not very good with technology, so called in with my cell phone.
No worries. Thanks, Connie.
Okay.
Thank you, Connie.
There you go.
Stephen, sorry for cutting you off there.
Hey, no worries. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I was a little nervous because it's a little different setup. My computer's acting a little wonky today. So thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been about 9 months since we started the evaluation of Maryland and White Bear, and really throughout this period, we have explored numerous approaches to enhance transit and safety in this corridor. I'm really excited about that we're now able to start preparing to share this evaluation results with the community, the 4 options that we have. And in today's presentation, I will highlight some of the key differences that we have identified between these options. The next slide. So we have numerous criteria, as you can see, including ridership, costs, and viability, CIG rating, which are still underway in terms of evaluation, but Craig will go deeper into some of these aspects later on in the presentation. We plan to provide the public with a preview of our findings related to ridership and costs as well. So I just wanted to note that we do plan to share it, and Craig will go into a little bit more detail. All right. So while I discussed the differences between the four options, I plan to do that, but it's important to note that all the options offer many transit and non-transit benefits. These benefits will be in common with all the different options. And sometimes we don't talk about that piece enough. But I wanted to go over what we have in terms of what we see related to project benefits. As you know, that we are offering a more frequent and reliable and faster transit service. And what comes with that is better stations. But some of the things that we're hearing in terms of it's hard to cross White Bear Avenue in Maryland. We plan to address that in our options. So we will have safer pedestrian crossings in our options, and that's going to be common between all of them. More comfortable place to walk. We're also filling in sidewalk gaps. There's gaps in Maplewood that we plan to fill in. St. Paul currently has about 100% sidewalks in all the areas, but we also plan to reconstruct the sidewalks and create better accessible curb ramps too as well. And then in terms of foot traffic, we can see that we're going to increase with more ridership. We're going to see with more foot traffic in the area to have more pedestrians walk around. You can go to one more slide on this one. And so in terms of safety, again, we're going to have new medians, turn lanes, signals, and then we're also taking things down to a single lane in each direction. This is going to be a more comfortable experience for folks, more predictable experience for folks too as well. Kind of using those traffic calming tools that's in our toolbox to help with that. Modern infrastructure related to the pavement and gutters and drains. All these are areas where we're going to make improvements to it. And on top of that, we're going to have opportunities for greening in the corridor. And then as we think about how we move customers or move folks onto transit, we're going to reduce the amount of auto that will be driving in the corridor. That's an environmental benefit to the corridor too as well. So I just wanted to highlight a few of these because again, it's one of those things that we always talk about transit, but there's a lot of non-transit benefits that come along with a project like ours. In the next slide. As part of this, I wanted to provide you an example of what a full construction project really entails. This exhibit will be shared with the public during our open house to ensure everyone understands the nature of when we talk about a full reconstruct, what does that really look like? To the next slide. So we have various criteria. We found that land use and environmental and concept dimensions and parking are all consistent across all the concepts that we're talking about. These factors may become differentiators when we compare to the Bruce Wintle Trail alignment in the spring, summer. But in terms of what we're talking about in terms of differences between the options, these are what we would call non-differentiator criteria. We have identified 5 criteria that start seeing differences between the options. So that's pedestrian safety and traffic operations and transit operations and property impacts. So I'm going to go through each one of these in a little bit more detail. I will say though, when we go out to the public, we're going to have a board that rolls up basically at the very front end that explains what we're seeing as key trade-offs. And then we will have boards that are very specific to these subject matter areas that will allow people to be able to have more detailed conversations with subject matter experts. But we do plan to have a board that summarizes what we see as key trade-offs. So for pedestrian and station access, there are no major differences in St. Paul because all the options are similar within the same right-of-way space of about 67 feet. Where we start seeing these differences is in Maplewood. We start to see differences in terms of low stress, what it feels to be closer to a travel lane. And the pedestrians are further away, as you can see, from the travel lane in some of the options. Additionally, the center platform can be challenging for people with impairments or accessibility challenges because you have to now move and try to navigate towards the center to get onto the bus. So we are seeing some trade-offs between center running and side running between the options. So for safety, we are providing 9 pedestrian refuges in St. Paul, which is common between all the options. However, the differences lies in the shorter crossing distance. We start to see that with the, as you can see with the measurement here, with the side running option that is just a single transit lane versus the true transit lane option. The true transit lane option requires space for left turns, pedestrian refuges. The single transit lane requires mitigations, which is a trade-off for the median barrier to discourage cars from bypassing the buses. So as you can see, we would end up having to kind of implement and it doesn't show it well on this one, but we would end up having to implement a barrier to discourage cars from weaving as they kind of wait for the buses to load, weaving into oncoming traffic. So we would have to mitigate that. In terms of safety within Maplewood, the center running option provides a natural pedestrian refuge with a total of about 19 of them that we would end up seeing happening with center running option in Maplewood. For the side running, we see that there would probably be maybe 1 or 2 opportunities related to a pedestrian refuge. In the center running option, left turns are restricted to protected signals. And the right turns are occurring in the through right situation. So you can kind of see that we're able to kind of facilitate that a lot easier with the side running option, where now the right turners can utilize that transit lane to make it easier right. And so those are some of the major safety differences that we're starting to pick up. You know, one other thing related to center running too, as well, is that we would end up having to close those unsignalized intersections because we don't want traffic crossing the guideway. And so we only really want to have that happen at a signalized intersection. But what that means is that all those opportunities where cars would naturally turn at an unsignalized intersection, we're able to kind of eliminate those potential crashes in the future. So the center running would carry through a median all the way through, or have the center running transit lanes. And so we would end up closing those unsignalized intersections, and that would also help with crashes in the future too as well. So from a traffic standpoint, we're not seeing a significant difference in St. Paul. And the travel time is really the same. You're not really seeing a lot of green, which is green is good. And so at the end of the day, we're not seeing a lot of major changes between what's happening in St. Paul, regardless if it's side running with 2 transit lanes or side running with a single transit lane. One of the things that we do have to do a little bit differently is with the 2 single lane options, is that we have to incorporate left turn lanes. And the single lane option already has that center running left. So it allows for more opportunities, and you don't have to worry about creating more space to create that left turn lane. So that's the trade-off between having a center running left turn lane. And it also is a natural space to be able to create that pedestrian refuge too as well. So every time that we end up having to incorporate a left turn lane, it just gets a little bit wider. We did do a safety analysis to understand where those opportunities where we could add in more left turn lanes. And so we identified Maryland and Hazelwood, and then White Bear and Arlington as opportunities to add in that left turn lane to also help with traffic too as well. Go to the next. So for center running, we have more intersections that will experience increased delay, mostly on the side streets. And again, this is due to the left turn lane being restricted to a protected signal, and then all the unsignalized intersections being closed with that median barrier too as well. So those are really the major differences. It is a little bit more delay associated to that center running. You can see that with a little bit more different colors lighting up in the center running option on the screen. So Related to transit operations, in St. Paul, we're not seeing a big significant difference in travel time between the two options. The single transit lane option may be a little bit slower for transit in the southbound direction where there is no transit lane on Maryland Avenue. We also have H line, and obviously we're going to have Purple line. So there's a lot of different buses that will be utilizing the same platforms on Maryland Avenue. And that's one of the reasons why we end up seeing that being a little bit slower of an option. But overall, the two transit lane option is a little bit more reliable too as well. So we look at this as the two transit lane option to be a more reliable in terms of predictability in performance of that option for transit. The center running transit lane is a little bit faster. And we all would expect for that to be a little bit faster than the side running. But what we heard from a maintenance standpoint is that the side running is easier to maintain. And so there's trade-offs between how to maintain these, especially in the winter conditions too as well, that we're hearing when we actually talk to Metro Transit staff about what does it mean to actually maintain the stations. Mm-hmm. And so just hearing that it's a little bit more difficult to related to maintaining a center running station. So now we're going to talk a little bit about property impacts. I will say this will be a high level view of property impacts, which will also be shared at the open houses. There will be more detailed versions of the property impacts that I'm about to show you today that will be shared with the public. But just how we categorized it into 3 different categories where we have strip and minor. And again, these are kind of common in full reconstruction projects where there's going to be some temporary and some minor permanent takings related to lawn space to accommodate some of the width that we will have to increase, especially when we get to the station level. At the stations, it gets a little bit wider, right? For the major ones, we're now talking about loss of parking stalls or retaining walls that we have to do, more permanent infrastructure related to what it means to be a little bit of a major impact. And then there's the total takes. Those are the ones that we see that it's kind of hard to avoid. These are more larger conflicts where it may impact an existing building or a resident, and it requires for the property for the project to acquire the property.
Should we just take a pause quick? I know we just had a question in the chat from Commissioner Jiang. How often are stations maintained? This is really part of our transit maintenance, and it depends on the station. But I don't know if Craig, you have any answers to that?
I think I'd prefer to follow up with, we have standards. I think the one thing that always comes to mind, and one of the benefits of doing a project like this for a quarter that already has service, is we do have a hierarchy to our station maintenance. And so our LRT platforms are the highest priority for snow removal and maintenance, followed by the BRT platforms down to an individual bus stop. So as we deploy resources, for example, after a snowstorm, the regular bus stop is going to be one of the last things cleared out. So that's one of the benefits of bringing a BRT corridor to, say, White Bear Avenue, which has the 54 today and other service. The stops are going to be maintained better because these will now become BRT platforms. But the frequency and of cleaning and things like that, the biggest things are snow removal and power washing. Power washing during the summer, snow removal during the winter. But we do have standards that we could share, unless Nick can supplement what I'm speaking to better than I can.
I would I agree with that, and also add that we are adding to those standards now as a priority. The legislature with the passage of the regional sales tax, and so we are our standards are getting stronger, and our resources to meet those standards are increasing significantly. So, but BRT is already a very high standard, and will so what we're doing across the system, including here, will be even higher standards in the future, and by the time this project would open, for sure.
Great, thanks. Sorry, Stephen, but I think it's good since we're in this area to talk about it. Commissioner, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, so in terms of property impacts, again, this will be shared with the public too as well. And we will have a plan set that really shows it in more detail too. If a property owner is interested in seeing it in more detail, they will have that opportunity to also talk with a subject matter expert too at the open house. Our overall goal is try to limit the property impacts and stay within much as we can within the right-of-way limits that we have. We are communicating with property owners and especially the ones that have a little bit more impacts related to their access or parking or the full property take. We want to avoid people from being surprised at an open house. So that's one of the reasons why we're starting to reach out to folks early and start having those conversations with them, encouraging them to go to the open house too as well to kind of talk more if they have more questions as well. The red indicates that you see on here is a full property take, which is something that would be for both options. It's basically based on the station location and where it's at right now. So that's one of the reasons why that is showing up. But we overall see that the side running will have a little bit more property impacts because we're accommodating those left turn lanes. We're accommodating those pedestrian refuges. So it gets a little bit wider in spots. So there is more opportunity for potential property impacts there. You go to the next slide. The two transit lane option results in more impacts here again for the same reason, is because we're accommodating those medians, we're accommodating those left turn lanes. So again, you see a little bit more property impacts. And what we will do for the open house is actually distinguish between that yellow that you're seeing now. We will end up kind of creating it so you can actually see, is it related to side running with the two transit lanes, or is it related to just the single transit lane option? So we will end up having a little bit more detail when we show the public. You can go to the next slide. So for the Maplewood segment, the two transit lane option results in property impacts, again, due to the median and left turn lanes. The center running option, again, is a little bit wider. So there's a little bit more major impacts that are associated to the center running option too as well. So just something to note. And then my last slide, again, in Maplewood, we have one that is identified as a full property take, and that one's only due to the center running option. Again, the center running option is a little bit wider, so then you end up seeing a little bit more property impacts to it, less so related to the two side running. And one thing to note is that in Maplewood, the right-of-way space is a little bit wider. So that's one of the reasons why we see less impacts associated to the two side running options, is because we can fit that within our right-of-way a little bit easier. But that's pretty much all I have in terms of my presentation. Again, the public will have an opportunity to see these and also see it in a more detailed way if they have questions related to property impacts.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Any questions or comments on that presentation?
Mr. Chair, sorry, I can't get to the raising the hand.
Sure, go ahead. Just jump in.
I have a question about the for at least the St. Paul section about the center running option, and if that had been eliminated completely, and or if that had been considered at all.
So we're currently, it was eliminated, and it was eliminated due to the amount of property impacts that it would actually that would occur with it. One of the things that we're doing in the center running option, or in all our options, is that we're trying to maintain a certain amount of sidewalk space and a certain amount of boulevard space. When we take into account all those different pieces of what it means to create the cross section, it was much wider than the 67 feet that exist there today. So we ended up seeing that to be way more impactful than what you're even seeing on the map today. If we wanted to try to maintain all those different dimensions, it was going to be a wider cross section that was going to end up impacting largely a lot of different property owners. So it was eliminated, but then now that we are in talks, I know that there's been some Some thoughts related from D2 and others that we've been hearing, Purple People as well, related to the center running option. We are looking at the center running option in the sense of trying to understand if we narrowed up things, could it be less impactful? So that is something that we're currently looking at right now to try to see those dimensions that I was describing before. If we reduce certain things, could we get it narrow enough that maybe it could fit, but will there still be property impacts? Because center running still, you need to provide that left turn lane. So then you are signals, you are getting wider there. And then still you have the platforms too as well, which it will get wider there too as well. So we are looking at it right now, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Do you think we'll be able to get more information at the next meeting, or how much time do you anticipate this to take?
So we just started talking about it right now. We plan to try to start pulling together plans, like start seeing what it means from a layout standpoint, and then understand that property impact. One of the things we wanted to do was circle back with the members that brought that up. We wanted to meet with them. We already had an in-person meeting with them last week to talk a little bit more about it. What we want to do is spend the month of March trying to pull together all that information and then set up a meeting with them again to kind of show them what that impact will potentially be. We can certainly bring that to April CMC if you're interested in that, or we can certainly set up a separate meeting with you, Commissioner, to kind of go through it in a little bit more detail of what we're seeing related to the potential right-of-way impacts. It can be done either way.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a preference. I just want to make sure that we are considering those options too, and also looking at the impacts, and also kind of the trade-offs around it, and that we're all able to make those informed decisions.
Great questions. Any other comments?
Ianni has a question, I believe.
Yes, I have my virtual hand up, Chair Zelle.
Sure. Oh, lovely. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I do want to say, Stephen, thanks so much for this recap on the purple line. I wanted to share with all of you actually that I'll be on maternity leave starting April 15th through the end of July. So I'm going to have my legislator aide join these meetings on my behalf. And I did want to share that, to get some sort of update on the center lane option would be really great if before I go on leave, just because I know there is a lot of support for that option from the constituents in my ward who are very strong purple line advocates. And so I want to make sure that that our staff are working on collecting information on that to see if it is indeed a viable option we can move forward with. And so that context is helpful for me to be able to continue having conversations with my constituents too as they ask for updates on this. And one quick question I did have for you, Stephen, is I was wondering if you can talk a bit more on, like, for the center lane option, what happens if there's any sort of overflow from transit riders who are waiting to get on the bus? Can you explain what that scenario would look like, and if there was that overflow, where would people be waiting for the bus? For me, it kind of seems like if like the bus station is on where the sidewalk normally is, then people would just maybe they can make a queue a queue along the sidewalk. But for the center lane, it'd be helpful to know what that looks like.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm going to be the best because maybe there's some examples in the system currently today on that center running option and how overflow kind of looks. I don't know if Craig, if you have any context related to that overflow related to where the platform can't accommodate everyone. I think that's specifically what you're asking, right, council member?
Yep, that's correct. And if there isn't an answer, that would be something that I want to ask you all to think about as you're looking at that center lane option, because I would imagine that as we as the purple line is up and running, that we continue to have more transit riders in the area too, not only in St. Paul but along the entire bus line, which is what we want to see. And so I want us to be ready to respond to that too and have a successful plan for that.
Nick might be able to respond to it better. My only experience has been when a station near a special event generator, then we have to take additional measures to be able to do that. But a regular station, I'm not sure that I've got any experience with that.
Yeah, we can look into that, but definitely these are stations that can accommodate in quite a bit of people. And then of course the bus is coming either every 10 or 15 minutes. So, but it's definitely, we'll take into consideration as we're kind of looking through this center running, re-looking at it and kind of think through it. Any places that maybe would have special event type crowds. We have that, some of our rail stations where we've really had to consider large crowds at specific times. And so we'll look at that too.
Thank you so much.
And council member, I will, as well as the commissioner, make sure that your staff is aware of the progress related to what we're learning related to the center running option in St. Paul. So again, we're spending the month of March kind of digging into some of the details related to it, and then we'll plan to circle back with the interested parties related to the center running, so they understand what we're seeing. And to be honest with you, I don't know if there's a lot of legs to it. I mean, we eliminated it for the reasons that I kind of talked about before, but in terms of what does it mean for property impacts in the corridor, I don't have that answer. And that's one of the things that we're trying to dig into to understand what is that minimum cross section? What does that really look like? And then again, what does that mean in terms of property impacts in the corridor? So.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, thank you. Great conversation. And we will obviously get back to everybody in real time. But in the meantime, Councilmember Yang, good luck with your leave. And we'll be thinking of you. And maybe we'll have some time to get some updates before then. Any other thoughts, questions, Stephen? All right. Then we have an opportunity. I see Ianni's here to hear from our Community and Business Advisory Committee report. But actually before that, I just want to remind everybody that, as I mentioned, a lot of this technical and kind of some of these options that we were just looking at will be on our website and actually available for public comment for the next month. So that's just, this is going to continue to evolve and is obviously timely with that center running conversation. Ianni, do you have something you would like to share regarding the CBAC activities?
Yeah, I can brief on our 23rd meeting. We covered route modification study phase 2, and we went over federal funding, ridership cost information, overviewed the project benefits for the community, and reviewed some engagement plans materials, made some changes. So it's easier for people that are looking at a schedule, so it's a little easier to understand what that schedule is looking like. And then in our comments area, with there were concerns for business impact, of course, like we were just talking about. Questions on the construction and how that would make delays within the corridor, specific. And then we had our the comparative to 54 route and the replacement of that. And then ongoing conversations about the arcade street stop by the YMCA and the unearthing of Block and TB, the project with the creek, Phelan Creek there. And then also, as you heard, the center running option on Wiper Ave South in the St. Paul side. And that conversation was looking at comparative projects within the same space, and then curtailing traffic speeds back down to something reasonable, not what they're currently at 47 miles an hour. And then there were some questions about budget and FTA routing. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions? Yeah, I appreciate the feedback and your engagement. This local and community and business perspective is really, really important. Hey, well, thanks so much, Ianni, and we'll continue to have meetings.
Thank you.
We've got questions, I think, from Commissioner Zhang and Councilmember Valencia.
Yeah, go ahead. How about Councilmember Valencia? Nikki.
Thank you. Yeah, I was wondering just briefly if there are any minority-owned businesses that have been engaged in the CBAC, specifically in Maplewood.
And as far as I am aware, believe that's Laurie's end of town, and I'm not. We had not our last CBAC meeting, but the previous we had a large turnout. The last one, I think we only had 7 people, and there were a lot more business engagement at that one, but and there was some minority-owned business at that meeting.
Thanks. I would just encourage maybe reaching out to the businesses that are right on that Maplewood St. Paul border. There's some really good businesses that I think we should engage. Thank you.
Agreed.
Thanks. We'll take a good note of that and see if we can be sure we don't lose contact with those businesses. And I see, Commissioner, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the points that Ianni shared, did those questions get answered already, or do you still have? Does the committee still have concerns around those items, like especially around like the assessments? Yeah.
The assessments were so the assessments with our project with federal funding versus the city picking it up or the county picking it up. That was answered.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that some of these comments and questions were concerned at the committee level for sure.
Okay. Anything else? I don't see any. Let's jump into our community outreach and engagement update. And that's actually Colin Owens. You actually might address some of these questions about connecting with businesses, but go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, absolutely. So just going to give a broad overview of what we've recently been doing, what we plan to do, and for this upcoming comment period. And then, try and see if there's any feedback for me or feedback for the team as we continue to develop our outreach. But March 11th is right around the corner. So we're really trying to hit the ground running. So this is just an overview of our recent community events and stakeholder meetings. So we've been, reaching District 2, St. Paul Planning Commission, Ramsey County Service Center, which has a lot of people that go to get financial support and receive benefits from the county. And so they go, and we've actually run into a lot of people who travel in the East Metro to get to clinics, to get to grocery stores, to get to work. And so that's been a really beneficial thing. We've also done transit assistance registration, so helping people get $1 rides, because basically everybody that goes to the county service center is eligible for TAP. So we've been doing that. Purple Line Partners, White Bear Avenue Business Association, which Councilmember Villavicencio, that has also been a nice supplemental to the CBAC. There's been a lot of diverse business voices, and we've had some good conversations, and we'll continue to reach out to them even if they're not on CBAC. So that's still an expectation and a requirement to our outreach. So we'll continue to do that. We also have just been tabling at Harmony Learning Center and kind of going through that road. So go to the next slide, please. And then we are continuing to look at some additional outreach. Now, We just completed our kind of meeting to discuss where we're going to go, who we're going to reach out to. So this list is a little light right now, but we're planning on adding quite a few, organizations and businesses that are representing different diverse communities. We are hoping to do some door knocking to a lot of multifamily residences, both in St. Paul and Maplewood. So that's going to be about 20 residential multifamily places where most of them are folks with disabilities, low income, and I can certainly get that list of people that are curious. And then we also have created some go, no go options to reach out to, places like Eastside Senior Services, mosques, senior community, indigenous community members, lower income and older residents, Maplewood residents, the Hmong community, and some other key destinations along the corridor. So we'll continue to figure out those, and we're kind of scheduling those and preparing the materials for the outreach period. This next week, we'll be reaching out to organizations that represent different interests and just giving them update on the project and instructions on how to attend the open houses. We also sent out postcards to the community, and we have checked with a couple of people in the community that they've received the notices for the open houses, along with some other materials like, project sheets or fact sheets, and also just in notes about property impacts. So we've been doing a lot of mailers and engagement that way to kind of get broad support. So you can go to the next slide. So this is our property impacts engagement. So we had 18 key properties that we needed to engage to get ahead of the open house period, so that people were caught off guard if they came to seeing that their property would have, high impacts. So, we've reached out to business owners, libraries, businesses along White Bear Avenue, businesses along Maryland. And so we've talked with cemeteries, restaurants, tattoo parlors, banks, small businesses, corporate businesses. So we've really hit the ground running, and we're about 89% complete with our engagement. I think we just have to wrap up with a couple of residences and some pending meetings that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. So we're hoping to wrap that up before we get to the open houses. So these are our two outreach and engagement windows. We have kind of the engagement over the roadway and transit design options. We have our open houses, and like I said, we'll be doing scheduled tabling and canvassing opportunities, which will have a confirmed list. So if anybody would like to know about that, we're also going to try and post that on our website once we get all the dates and locations so people can engage. And as we do more newsletters or updates, we'll be doing reminder updates and social media posts to remind people to come to the open houses, since that's the majority of where a lot of our content and information is going to be. But yeah, I think that's what we're doing. So, yep. And then these are the community meetings.
Thanks, Colin.
Yep.
Any questions for Colin on the community outreach? Nikki, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I thank you so much, Colin, for all your work. I was thinking, have you considered possibly doing any more outreach on the actual Bruce Vento Trail? Because I use the Bruce Vento Trail quite often, and I get stopped. I would say frequently about like where the project is on that. So maybe when it's a little bit warmer, thinking about tabling near a business that's by the Bruce Vento or even on the Bruce Vento might be helpful, just to allow people to understand what's really going on.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, that sounds good. And I think we're planning on getting, when we get closer to that second window, that's when we'll go out, because we'll have new information as we're kind of we're going to have to reevaluate the Bruce Vento Trail to kind of get it similar or up to speed with kind of new ridership data and all that stuff. And so we'll have kind of a process that we'll go through to engage Bruce Vento Trail. But I think that makes a lot of sense. So you can definitely think about that. Yep.
Right. Thanks. Commissioner, do you have your hand up, or is that from before?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question for Colin about just the engagement. Like, are you like, what does a successful engagement look like at this point? Like, are you measuring like the number of people that you're connecting with, the diversity, or the people who use transit, the people who don't use transit? What are your goals, and where do you assess it to be at this point?
Yep. So I would say what we've developed is kind of a communications and outreach plan. And I think there's kind of a series of stakeholders that we need to address through this outreach period. So our first group was the elected officials and commissioners and council members and district councils. And so we've already hit that mark in terms of getting the information out to our elected officials to kind of start the conversation. And then we have kind of our key stakeholder groups like transit riders, community organizations, and business, and like key organizations, businesses. And so we have kind of set like strategies that we're going to use to communicate those to those folks. And so that's kind of our plan. And then I think what we haven't figured out kind of what goals we have, except to just encourage people to come to the open houses and engage with the survey, because ultimately we do have kind of a comment card piece that's going to be a part of our outreach. And so we'd really like people to fill that out and give us their kind of strongly agree, disagree type of preference towards the design options after we kind of help. We have to go through an education process or an engagement process to get people up to the point of being able to respond and provide their feedback. And so really we're just hoping to get different groups, all these different groups engaged in the conversation. So we have kind of our communications plan to make sure we capture all those voices.
Okay. Councilmember Cedarberg, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'll be attending the Maplewood open house. And I attended the one last time as well, and it was well attended. The people there running the engagement really did a great job of drawing people in, asking for suggestions. Really, anybody who was there, they felt welcome and they felt like they had an opinion to offer. So I think from what I saw from the first engagement I went to, it was really done quite well. And I'm looking forward to this next engagement. And I just want to thank all the presenters for all this information that was presented today. So I can have that at my fingertips as well. But I just thought I'd let you know I'll be at the Maplewood one coming up.
That's great, Gail. Thanks. Colin, thank you. We're going to hear more as we are deep into that work. We have 8 minutes left, and I know that Craig has some updates on some preliminary numbers and maybe some key metrics, and maybe and what that means for our next steps. So, Craig, you have the floor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will keep this rolling here. I've got about 7 slides that I'm going to talk about, and much of the topics will be talked about in more detail at the April CMC. Starting here with schedule, there isn't really a big update on our schedule compared to what we reported to this committee in January. We're still tracking toward a recommended design concept for the White Bear Avenue corridor, bringing that before this group in early May. And what was noted earlier by Stephen, we are right now still working on cost and ridership. In subsequent slides here, I do have some preliminary numbers to share with the committee as it relates to those two metrics. And you heard all about the engagement that starts on Monday. So all of the boards that people will see at the open houses that they come to, we're having those 2 in person, 1 virtual. All those materials will go live on our project website on Monday. And including the survey that was mentioned by Colin, so people can start giving us feedback. They don't have to wait until the open houses. So before I get into ridership, I just want to put this in context, the numbers that I'm going to share with you today. Travel and transit are different than they were pre-pandemic. I don't think that should be a surprise to many. Average weekday system-wide and park and ride boardings are lower than they were in 2019, 46% and 84% respectively. But over the last 2 years, we've seen great rebound in our regional ridership numbers. Ridership grew by 21% between 2021 and 2022, coming out of the first year of the pandemic. And then compared to 2022 to 2023, we saw a 16% increase in regional ridership. And one thing to note coming with that rebound is that BRT lines now represent 15% all of our regional rides. So people are gravitating toward the fast, reliable service that comes with BRT lines. The other thing to note is who's riding transit now post-pandemic compared to pre-pandemic has changed. What we're seeing now is that transit's ever more important for our region's most vulnerable populations. That zero-car households now represent 50% of our transit ridership. Up from 35%. Low-income households now represent 43%, up from 38%. Disability community represents 13%, up from 9%. BIPOC community now represents 55%, up from 42%, and BIPOC only represents 29% of the regional population. So what we're seeing on Purple Line being on the White Bear Avenue corridor is using current FTA guidance. We would estimate ridership is expected to be between 3,400 and 4,100 per day. That's using a federal formula that still currently mixes both pre-COVID and post-COVID ridership inputs. That's what the feds call for right now. The one other thing to note is don't get too locked into these numbers. We will be updating Purple Line's ridership estimate several more times over the course of the next couple of years, specifically after decisions are made on which endpoint, the mall or the County Road D station labor facility, and then what design concept we end up recommending for the White Bear Avenue corridor. In addition, the ridership tool we use is a federal model. They issue new releases to it from time to time. We are obligated to reforecast our numbers using their latest model when they release it. And we're also expecting that newer data inputs will be available. For example, the ridership numbers on this slide represent being calibrated to 2022 ridership. And so we don't have access to the 2023 ridership, but I noted in that slide before, it went up 16% system-wide. We would expect these numbers to change as a result. So before I get to the cost numbers for Purple Line on White Bear Avenue, want to emphasize that securing federal funding for a project of this scale is really important. Nearly $2.3 billion has been successfully captured from the Capital Investment Grant Program for 6 projects already to date in this region. And probably more importantly, there is no precedent for a regional transitway project of this scale, one exceeding $112 million, which was the red line a number of years ago, being implemented without this federal funding. Purple Line is not alone. Blue Line Extension and F Line are all seeking funding right now from this federal program, and there are 60 projects nationwide seeking funding for this program. So bottom line is Purple Line's viability without this federal funding is very uncertain, and we need to be paying attention to that. So as it relates to the preliminary cost numbers that we're seeing for Purple Line being on White Bear Avenue corridor, amongst the different design options, the side running, center running, and the various different combinations that Stephen walked through earlier, only about a 5% cost difference, really not a differentiator. It's about a 10% increase to the project cost estimate to go one station further beyond Maplewood Mall Transit Center to more directly serve St. John's Hospital and end at County Road D. So basically what you're seeing here on the slide is numbers ranging from about 380 million to about $440 million in total project costs. Note though that middle line item, the federal government expects us to carry a high level of contingency at early stages of design. We're at about a 5% level of design on White Bear Avenue corridor, south of Maryland about 30%. Overall, we're carrying a 40% per federal requirement right now on a project of this scale. So what do these numbers already tell us, even though they are still preliminary? What it tells us is what we were discovering when we were looking at truncating the line outside of downtown White Bear Lake about a year and a half ago on the Bruce Central Trail corridor. The ridership and cost numbers there were leading us in the direction of being a small starts project, not a new starts project, which is what we are currently. So back in September of 22, we told this committee in the Bruce Central Trail corridor, we were probably going to be a small starts project. That's what we're seeing here again. What that means is that we still get to stay within the federal program and be eligible for federal funds, but we're going to have to change the nature of the project a bit. So one of the biggest requirements and differences between new starts and small starts is the total project budget has to be less than 400 million. And as I showed on the earlier slide, several of our options are exceeding that right now. And so what that's going to mean is that the project scope is going to need to be reduced to maintain federal funding eligibility, which means elements will need to be funded outside of the transit project by other entities or not implemented at all. And so we don't know what that looks like right now. We've just recently discovered this, and this is going to be the primary topic for when we come back to the Corridor Management Committee in April. The entire 90-minute meeting will likely focus on that question. What does Purple Line look like as a small starts project if it wants to be on the White Bear Avenue corridor? These other meetings have not changed from the last time we shared them with you in January, so I won't dwell on it any further since we are at time, and I'll turn it back to the chair if any of the committee members have any questions on the slides I just covered.
Thanks, Craig, and you covered a lot. Of course, it's kind of a little sneak peek at what will be talked about at greater length next month. But at this point, and we are at time. I appreciate everybody staying over a minute. Any last questions? Our next meeting is scheduled for April 4th. I know in the future we're going to try to get off of Wednesday afternoons. I know that's a conflict for one of our committee members, so stay tuned on that. And a lot happening with this project now. Really appreciate some very substantive conversations and feedback. And Nikki, we're going to be reaching out, getting a meeting soon. And I can think of all the efforts that everybody's making to make sure that this is done the right way. So appreciate that, staff and volunteers and public officials. With that, it's sunny out, so enjoy the day, and we will we'll see you soon. This meeting's adjourned, but we'll be in touch. Thanks.
For everybody. Great meeting.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.